All right, thank you so much, Christine, for welcoming everybody. And again, welcome everyone to our CIELO workshop series. I'm very excited for today's workshop series. This is our first one for 2023. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's already 4:06. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to participate in our icebreaker, please go ahead and put in your name.
How are you in the back?
Sorry, if you can all put yourselves on mute too, please, if you're not speaking. But if you could put in your name, your the type of business you'll be starting, or the name of your business, or if you're participating here from an organization, we go ahead and put in the organization that you're representing today. So go ahead and put that in the next few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. So before we get started, just want to do a quick introduction as to who we are and what we do. So we are CIELO, for those of you who are not familiar, and stands for the Community for Innovation, Entrepreneurship, Leadership, and Opportunities. We officially launched in 2015, but we've been helping clients since 2012. We're a nonprofit organization helping aspiring entrepreneurs become business owners. So one nice thing about being a nonprofit is we do not charge for our services. Everything that we do is at no cost to our clients. We help you build and develop the entrepreneurial mindset needed to help you achieve success. And like we always like to say, we provide the resources and guidance, and all of you, the entrepreneurs, provide the hard work and the passion. So really what we're trying to do here is to help our clients launch a business. So what services do we offer here at CIELO? We do have a small business development training program. This is a 6-week program that we do offer just about every other month, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on our next slide. We also offer a monthly workshop series, which all of you are here participating in today. We also offer one-on-one small business coaching. If any of you want to talk to a small business coach, we do offer that service as well too. We do have a client navigation team, and we do support our clients up to business launch and even afterwards as well too. We also have a microgrant program for CIELO small business, for CIELO businesses that have gone through our small business startup program. If you do go through a small business startup program and complete all the requirements, you may be eligible for a small microgrant. And also we are a connection for small businesses, small business resources and services to all our clients as well too. Some upcoming events: we do have our next CIELO Small Business Startup Program. Starts on March 14th, 2023 at 4 p.m. So take a journey on the Entrepreneur Roadmap to Business Launch. This is our 6-week training program for entrepreneurs and startups. It includes 3 weeks of live classroom training. We do it Tuesdays and Thursdays on Zoom between 4 and 5 p.m. And we conclude it with 3 weeks of one-on-one business coaching. So topics include how to pick a business name, advertising on social media, introduction to business financials, and much, much more. So if you're interested in attending or learning more about it, please email us at info@cielocommunity.org. Or if you'd like to register, you see our QR code here to the right on our flyer here. You could always scan that QR code. It'll take you to the Eventbrite registration page, at which point you can register. And we'll also be sure to put that registration link in our chat, the chat box as well too. So some reminders of today's workshop: we are going to send out a recap email to everybody who registered by the end of the week. So by Friday, you will get a recap with a few different things: a recording of this actual Zoom session. And I want to make sure that I did press record, which I did. Good. Also, we will send out the presentation deck, slide deck that our guest speaker will be providing today. So all of you can focus on the content and on what Victoria is going to be talking about. That way you don't have to feel like you have to copy every slide down or take photos. So we will be sending that out. We'll also be providing the guest speaker contact information, along with more information for the organization, OneOC, which she represents. And we will have time for a Q&A session at the end. So we will have some time for Q&A. So if you can all just leave your questions to the end. There's a lot that we're going to be going over, and we'll be sure to leave some time for that to answer any questions you may have. With that said, that brings us to today's topic, how to start a nonprofit. Is it for you? This is a very exciting topic. We do get asked this a lot at CIELO from a lot of our clients. And I took this training, actually, I took this, this webinar a few months back. I learned a lot. And I think all of you can get a lot out of this as well, too. We had a very good registration rate for this. We have a lot of people here today. So very excited to present Victoria Muffie from OneOC, where she'll be presenting on how to start a nonprofit. Also with her is Anna Marie. And at this point, Victoria, I would like to say that the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alex. And we'd like to thank CIELO for letting OneOC be here today. We are also a nonprofit, so we share their passion in how nonprofits support our communities. So this is a great topic for us to be sharing with you. I'm going to share my screen. If Alex, you can let me put in my presentation. I think you've got to stop your share. And we'll jump right in. I do want to leave enough time for us to have Q&A. So as Alex said, we're going to go through the slide. I'm not going to go through a lot of details, but you will get this content later. So don't worry about missing anything. We really just want to talk about starting a nonprofit. Why would you consider it? Is it the route for you? And if it is something you definitely want to move forward with, what are some things you have to consider to do that? So I am Victoria Muffie. I oversee OneOC's fiscal sponsorship program, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And at this point, I'm also going to introduce my colleague, Anna Marie. Let her tell you a little bit about herself, and then she can also tell you a little bit about OneOC.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Victoria. Like she said, my name is Anna Marie Lichina. I am the Nonprofit Accounting Services Manager here at OneOC. So in my service in particular at OneOC, once nonprofits have their 501c3 status and they have their lovely accounting. I say lovely, I am biased. I do actually like it. But they want to do their accounting. We can help do that pretty much from beginning to end. So that's a little bit background about me and how we are. And you want me to go into the whole OneOC? Okay, she's putting me on the spot. No, I'm kidding. So OneOC, the way we like to say it is we are a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits in just a myriad of different ways. So we have a lot of different services, not only fiscal sponsorship like Victoria does or accounting services like I do, but we have, oh my goodness, I think we're up to 16 different services, but we have things such as volunteer services, you know, getting volunteers to help out with nonprofits in the area and connecting volunteers to potentially your new nonprofit that you want to do. We have training services such as this, you know, and, you know, on a myriad of different topics that you can learn about. And I mean, kind of the list goes on. And we have membership where we just help you with different services, and we just want to help nonprofits in a lot of different ways. And so anytime you want or need help, we just want to be able to do that.
Great, thanks, Anna Marie. I know that Alex had mentioned taking this training before. This training was developed in conjunction with the Public Law Center, and you'll get their contact information in this deck. They are a pro bono legal service in Orange County that supports nonprofits. So whenever we get someone requesting legal assistance, we always refer them to the Public Law Center. And as I said, we'll give you their contact information at the end of this deck. The other thing we have to put in our disclaimer at the start of all of our trainings, we are not legal professionals. Anna Marie and I are not attorneys. Additionally, I'm not a tax professional. So what we're providing you today is information and guidance on the process of looking at and starting a nonprofit. However, it's not meant to take the place of professional legal and tax advice. So the Public Law Center, as I said, is a pro bono legal firm in Orange County. They can talk to you about the legalities. And then if you need to talk to a tax professional, you can reach out to OneOC and we can connect you to a couple of them. So we're going to jump right into the agenda. It looks fairly lengthy and complex, but it's really just broken out into some bites of information just to lead you on the journey of, do I want to start a nonprofit? What is a nonprofit? And how do I go about doing it if it is the path for me? So let's first talk about what is a nonprofit. And this is something that it seems kind of basic. It's an organization that doesn't make profits, but that's not exactly what it is. A nonprofit is a community asset, or it's a public benefit corporation owned by the community. And this is something good to consider when you think about starting a nonprofit. You have to think about what you as a founder want to control in your organization, because a nonprofit is actually not owned by somebody. It's a public benefit corporation, and it's overseen by a board of directors. So no one person owns a nonprofit, and that's something to consider. I especially tell clients who maybe need that sense of control in their business. You have to look at a nonprofit as something that you're developing to support your community. It's supposed to benefit your community, and you and your board, you guide that organization in that support. The other thing I'd like to emphasize with nonprofits is they can make a profit, but the profit goes back into the organization to continue the support of the community. So the profit doesn't go to a person as, say, a stock, or it doesn't go to give the board compensation. Any monies made by a nonprofit go right back into the nonprofit. So those are some important things to consider when you think about the type of organization that you want to form. This is a great slide, and these questions will mirror an assessment tool that we have provided to CIELO that I know they're going to be able to send out to you. Just questions that you need to think about when you say, okay, I'm ready to start a nonprofit. Why? Like what is it you're trying to accomplish? A big question is, does the community need your nonprofit? What you're trying to develop, your programming and services, is it a community need? Because that's the functionality of a nonprofit. And then also, is the programming that you're intending, is it really charitable? And this is where you can look at the IRS website, and they have some guidance on what is considered charitable. So you got to first start with, does the community need me? And am I providing a service that's charitable? And if you can kind of get through those first two questions, then you can continue down the path of really researching nonprofits. So this is a really great slide, again, just to start asking yourself questions about what is it you want to accomplish and why do you want it to exist? In terms of the nonprofit corporation status, so every nonprofit organization is a corporation, and where you incorporate may be different, but it does have to be incorporated. So for example, in the state of California, OneOC is incorporated as a public benefit corporation, but then additionally, in order to be a nonprofit, we have to also apply to the IRS for our tax exempt designation. So you're going to always be a corporation to start, but then within the nonprofit world, there's going to be other legalities that you also have to face in order to get that tax exempt status. Now, to remember, a corporation is formed by persons. It's an enterprise, but it's not a person. It's not owned by a person if you are a nonprofit. It is overseen by a board of directors. And later on, we're going to talk about board of directors because they are very important functionality as you look at starting a nonprofit. This slide gives you just a really simple structure of a board. Every board needs to have a minimum of 3 people. That actually in California is a requirement. And there are 3 specific positions that have to be on that board. The first one is your chairperson or your president. That's going to be position 1. The second position is a secretary. You need to have a designated secretary. And the third position is your treasurer or CFO. So when you think about starting a nonprofit and putting together your board of directors, these are positions that have to be in place when you file your corporation documents. And then of course, underneath that board, would be the staff of your nonprofit. And they can be employees or they can be volunteers. And you'll find with some nonprofits, they can be completely volunteer run. And other nonprofits like OneOC were run by a staff of employees, but were supplemented with volunteers. So the big thing we talk about with the nonprofit organization is this tax exemption. So we call it tax exempt status, or you are a charitable organization that can take in donations that are tax deductible for your donors. So what does that mean? What it means is a nonprofit is not going to pay federal or state tax. We're exempted from that. However, it doesn't mean you're exempt from all taxes. And this is a question that often comes up. So I just give you some examples of taxes you still have to pay as a nonprofit. One of them is property tax. One is sales tax. If you're selling something, and nonprofits can sell items, they can make revenue off of selling t-shirts or hats where their logo's on it, but you still have to pay sales tax. We are also not exempt from what we call employer taxes. So if you have employees, you're going to have to pay all of the taxes related to having employees. That is not exempt. But the donations you take in, the revenue that you take in, that revenue from a federal and state level is exempt. So that's something to also take into consideration when you're going to be looking at putting together your organization, putting together a budget. Remember that even though you're tax exempt in some arenas, it doesn't mean you're tax exempt in all. The next couple of slides are some really simple pros and cons, and it's not all the pros and cons, but it's just some things to consider when you're looking at a nonprofit corporation. We just talked about the tax exemptions. That's an advantage of being a nonprofit. Taking in tax deductible contributions, that's also an advantage to being a nonprofit. And those contributions can also be grants. So remember, not a lot of for-profits can take in grants, but most 501c3s can take in grants from government, public, and private funders. There is a formality to being a nonprofit corporation. So when you're out working with donors, there is a structure or formality to how you're operating. Some of the downsides to being a nonprofit, and the first one is paperwork, because in order to be that charitable benefit corporation, there's a lot of oversight by the state and federal governments. They want to know what you're doing and they want to know how you're doing it. So there's a lot of filings, not just when you get started, but then ongoing annually, there's filings that you have to continue to do. And then of course, there's cost to starting up a nonprofit corporation. There's incorporation filing fees. And then there's also IRS filing fees, because again, even though you're incorporated as a corporation, maybe in California, that doesn't give you the tax exempt status that you need. That comes through an application to the IRS. We talk about government oversight, transparency. Big part of being a nonprofit is you have to be transparent in all of your dealings. And a lot of that is because donors, when they give you money that's tax deductible, a lot of them are giving it because they are aligned with your mission, or they are aligned with the services you're providing to the community. And they want to make sure the most amount of their money possible can go to the actual services you provide as part of your mission versus going into operational overhead. So I think you may have sometimes heard commercials where a nonprofit will say 95 cents of every dollar services our mission. That means that 95 cents of every dollar they bring in from a donor actually goes toward providing services that focus on their community. The remaining 5 cents is going to be paying off staff costs or any other staff expenses. So that transparency is important, not for just with the governmental oversight, but also with your donors. The other thing to take into consideration, again, depending upon the type of organization you want to run, nonprofits don't distribute profits to anyone. No one owns the nonprofit. It's a public benefit corporation. Officers don't get reimbursement because they had a better banner year being on the board. So those are a lot of things to consider when you think about what type of structure works best for what you want to accomplish. So at this point, I'll pause, because again, I don't want to go too fast, but I do want to give us time to have questions at the end. So do we have any questions at this point, Alex, or do you want me to continue?
I have a question.
Yes.
So in terms of forming a nonprofit, so right now the Sweet Mission Project, which is kind of will be the charitable arm of my cookie business. We're a public corporation. So is it best to, when you're forming a corporation, is it or a nonprofit, would it be best for us to form our own, or would it be best to serve under a nonprofit that's already established, or something that we can use as like kind of as a I don't know what you call it, as a pass through?
Yes. Yeah, so you have a for-profit and you're thinking of having a philanthropic arm to your for-profit. When we get into the fiscal sponsorship section of the presentation, that's where we can talk more about what kind of opportunities do you have for a philanthropic arm? Because as we talk about forming a nonprofit, we're going to talk about private benefit or private inurement, which will inform how a for-profit can form a philanthropic counterpart. So stay with me, and we will attach that, or we'll attack that question as we continue.
Pardon. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and then my other question is, since my cookie business, we've been kind of doing things that most nonprofits do, like we do dinners twice a year, we do backpack giveaways and stuff like that. Is that stuff that we should be keeping record of now and moving forward, of establishing a 501c3, or what should that look like?
So if you're doing donations right now, and you don't have an established 501c, you can talk to your tax professional about your for-profit getting those tax write-offs as donations. However, it depends on if you're giving them to another nonprofit or if you're just giving them out. You may not have a tax benefit until the 501c3 exists. I would definitely talk to your tax professional about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not too worried about the tax. I was just wondering. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, I'm going to move on because I know that we want to get through a lot of the next one. Do we have any questions regarding the information I just presented?
I was just going to say, Victoria, thank you, Jason, for your question. We did have Graciela that raised her hand, and also Jackie in the chat that had a question, but I didn't know if we wanted to hold off Victoria or wait till the end.
Well, if they were, I wanted to kind of pause for the content I just gave to see if anyone had immediate questions just about that content. But we can continue and then wrap it up as we go through how you actually go through starting this nonprofit.
Perfect.
Hi, this is Graciela. May I ask?
Yes. Hi, Graciela. Yeah.
I established a nonprofit last year. I haven't paid for this year's, but it was in Wyoming. How do I merge that with California, or can I continue in Wyoming, based out of Wyoming?
Okay. Yeah, so that's
California?
a legal question. That's a legal question. I do know you can file as an alien corporation in California, but whether you actually need to move to incorporating in California or how you would merge that is really something you should talk to a lawyer about. I don't have that expertise.
Thank you.
No problem. So let's talk about the steps to forming your nonprofit. So some of this may seem pretty basic, but you'd be surprised in the discussions I have with folks how often they don't really address some of the basics. So first, let's talk about choosing a corporate name. Of course, that seems like of course I need a corporate name. But when you look about, especially in the nonprofit world, you want to make sure your name isn't too specific, because your nonprofit may start out serving a basic mission and then have different programming in service of that mission. So you want to make sure your name kind of covers everything you're hoping to focus on. I always tell folks, look and see what's out in the marketplace as well. Google and see if that name's already used, but put some thought into that name, especially put some thought into your mission statement. This is one thing that I see a lot of folks struggle with. Your mission is a very short 1 to 2 sentences statement about why do you exist. It's not the programming you provide. So for example, I want to help youth and under-resourced communities with after-school tutoring. Well, I could say, okay, the tutoring is a program. So what I'm really trying to do is to help youth with educational opportunities. So you can see how my mission is broad relative to education versus being specific to the type of programming I want to do. But I tell everyone, before you start, if you are considering yourself charitable, if you looked at the IRS definition and you can be a charitable entity, your mission statement is the next thing you do to really put into 1 to 2 sentences why you want to exist. So I would definitely put some time into that. The next thing that we tell folks to look at, what type of programming do you plan to provide in support of your mission? So a lot of folks will say, oh, I've got to set up this nonprofit, and they're so busy doing that, then when they're all set up, they don't know really what they're there to do in terms of services. So start thinking about your programming now as well. Develop a plan and develop a budget. Because the one thing you have to remember, even though a nonprofit doesn't make money, it still is a functioning business. So you have to look at it like a business. So we tell folks, even though we're passionate about what we do and we are a public benefit corporation and we serve the community, if we don't have a handle on our budget and finances, we won't be around very long. So the budget part is a very important process when you think about what kind of work do you want to do, what is that going to look like financially? Because again, as a nonprofit, you have to find the funding to support your reason for being. We talked earlier about the board of directors. I have a whole slide about it. I'm not going to go point by point, but I cannot emphasize enough how important the board of directors is to a nonprofit corporation. First and foremost, they are responsible for shepherding that organization. So they have an onus to act in good faith for that nonprofit. But more importantly, they're ambassadors for the nonprofit. They're the folks that can be out in the public talking about what you do and why people need to support you. So when you look at about assembling that board, look beyond just family and friends that say, hey, I want to be part of this with you. Think about, what are the type of people you need on this board to be successful? Do you need people with marketing backgrounds? Do you need people with financial backgrounds? Do you need people who will put the time into the board to help you? So when you think about your board, we have 3 things we tell you to consider: time, talent, and treasure. Be transparent with prospective board members about the amount of time they need to give to your organization to be successful. Be transparent about the type of skills you need for that board to be successful. And then be transparent if you need those board members to be contributors. So some nonprofits will do board giving campaigns, and the expectation is that the board members will donate to the nonprofit. That is not something you have to do, it's something you can do, but when you look at putting together this board, you have to be very transparent about the expectations of these board members. And that board development doesn't just happen once when you become a formal nonprofit. It is a continuing process with every nonprofit, that they keep that board in development, that they continue to look at, do I need a larger board as I grow? How am I going to recruit board members to help me with long-term sustainability? How am I going to put them through an orientation to even understand the nonprofit? So this board component is really important, and it's a place we tell folks, put some time into it. Again, you'll look at your first inner circle of family and friends. Look beyond that circle. What civic leaders in your community could serve on your board? What business leaders could serve on your board? But really start having those discussions, and sooner rather than later. Because if you have your board developing and in place when you start to look at developing your nonprofit, they're going to be part of that journey, and they're going to help carry the weight of what you have to do, both from a paperwork standpoint and all of the other operational responsibilities. They can be there to help you. So let's talk a little bit about legal steps. Again, this is an overview. It's not in depth, but it's just talking about if you're going to incorporate to become a nonprofit, First, you have to decide where you want to incorporate. Let's assume we're going to start in the state of California since that's where we're based. We always recommend you do it where you're based. You may have attorneys will give you different advice. Always listen to legal advice, but for our purpose, we're going to talk about California. First, you have to have articles of incorporation. This is a very formal document. And when you find legal support, they can help you with articles of incorporation. Once you have the articles of incorporation finished, you file those with the Secretary of State, and they become on your record as a corporation. Those articles of incorporation may change and can be amended, but you really do want to start out with a foundation of strong articles. The second thing you're going to look at besides your articles of incorporation are your bylaws. Your bylaws are how you are going to govern your corporation's activities. So how is your nonprofit going to work? Now, some nonprofits have memberships, so these bylaws would have information about how members interact with the nonprofit. But other than that, your bylaws are really going to be your processes and procedures. And again, this is something where you can get legal support to help you draft bylaws, or you can also reach out to like OneOC. Sometimes I'll give examples of bylaws to folks just to give them a sense of what they need to look at. But do your research on the bylaws and really try to do a strong document to start. In terms of tax exempt status, so you've incorporated, which is one step, and then we talk about how do you get tax exempt status. This comes through filing with the IRS. So you don't file through the state of California, you file through the IRS. There's a form called a 1023. There's also a form called a 1023 Easy. They work differently. So again, legal support can help you decide which one to use. This is what you would do if you're going to be a 501c3. Now there's other 501c designations, but the 501c3 nonprofit that we talk about is the one that's able to take in tax deductible contributions. Once you file, you have to wait for the IRS to give you your letter of determination that confirms you received tax exempt status. Now you can have some operations during that process. And again, I recommend you talk to an attorney as to what that looks like, but be able to manage your expectations that getting that IRS letter sometimes can take anywhere from 6 to 10 to 12 months. So the IRS doesn't turn it around quickly, but it doesn't mean you stop and wait for that letter. So again, when you're looking at your planning, you've got to consider all the things you have to apply for and what you can continue doing once your applications are in. Couple things about tax exempt status as a 501c3, and I'm really going to talk more here about the limitations, because this is really key when you think about your mission and your programming and services. 501c3s cannot lobby. They don't do political activities. Now, there are 501cs that can, but the C3s cannot. The other thing with a 501c3 is we talk about private inurement. So this is a concept wherein anyone that works for a nonprofit, so say, for example, my board of directors, if I have board members who are able to provide services to my nonprofits and get paid for those services, you have to be transparent and you have to bring forward a potential conflict of interest. Because the last thing you can do as a nonprofit is make sure one of your board members makes money off your nonprofit by virtue of being on the board. So that's where this private inurement, they also call it private benefit. You have to be very careful with your board members as to what are they bringing to the table. Doesn't mean they can't provide services to your nonprofit, but you have to be transparent as to what type of services are they providing and if they're getting paid. And if they didn't work on your board, would they still have the option to have those kind of contracts? So that's something you can talk more about with your attorney once you have your board identified, once you know your programming, and once you look at what type of services are you going to have to go out and pay for. Just some other startup formalities. I'm not going to go into it in real detail. Once you are able to incorporate, you have to have your first board meeting with your board of directors. You have to elect your officers. You have to record that into your minutes. You have to keep those minutes, and you have to really identify with your board, how are they going to engage. There's all kinds of other forms that you have to submit. Of course, it's the never-ending paperwork of being a nonprofit. But when you are looking at the process, again, someone like the Public Law Center can really set out for you step by step the type of paperwork that you would need to submit. Anna Marie, I'm going to have you step in real quick and just talk real quick about nonprofit accounting. We're not going to go into too much detail, but we do want to say nonprofit accounting and for-profit accounting can be a little different. So when you look at getting support for a nonprofit, we tell folks, make sure the people you're talking to have nonprofit accounting background, because there are some nuances. So Anna Marie, I'll let you take this slide real quick.
Yeah, thank you for leading that. Kind of like Victoria was saying, it's, you know, while generally accounting is going to stay the same for profit and nonprofit, there's going to be little nuances here and there. And so while we are nonprofits, and yes, you still want to make a profit, you know, ideally, and to help your nonprofit to be able to help your community, you know, it's really important for a number of reasons. One, compliance, and two, reporting. You know, Victoria's kind of mentioned, you know, for the compliance part, you know, you will have to file a 990 no matter what revenue that you hit. And then also you'll have audits, and that'll be depending on certain thresholds based on your revenue. It's also really important for grant reporting. If you're applying for grants, they always want to see your financials and how you are allocating that in your financial statements. And it's really important just to know in a general business health. And so ways that nonprofit accounting can be different is the way that you structure, and even just in the name. So like the first thing I learned here when I came was that, you know, in accounting, in nonprofit accounting specifically, the balance sheet has a different name. It is the statement of financial position. I will use both interchangeably, but I'm really supposed to be saying statement of financial position all the time. And then the same with income statement. That one's called statement of activities. So a lot of statements going around. But again, a lot of the process is going to be the same. You might have little nuances like, all right, you got to send out donor acknowledgement letters based on the numbers that you have recorded. You'll have grant reporting. So you want to have certain class codes in your accounting system so that you can generate reports so that your grantors know where you're spending your money and if you're spending it correctly, so that they can effectively, hopefully, give you more money in the future. But yeah, so that's generally the little nuances I'd say for nonprofit accounting.
Great, thanks, Anna Marie. I know that Alex is going to kill me because I'm going to be running behind schedule. So I'm going to catch up a little, Alex.
You're good. You're okay.
Because we did want to leave time for Q&A. Nonprofit insurance, this is just my slide to say, get it. You're going to need directors and officers insurance for your board. Everybody thinks that's all you need. That is not all you need. If you are running programming and services in schools, or you are doing work that's direct community services, you may need to look at general liability insurance. If you have employers, you have to, or employees, you have to have workers' comp. So do not neglect insurance. It's one of the areas I see most people think of last, and it really does need to be a consideration before you start. Oops, wrong way, sorry. This is a user issue right here. Okay, licenses and permits, depending on the type of organization you have. Your cities may have specific permits, or your type of programming may need a specific permit. Definitely a business license, but anything else you need to look into depending upon what you're going to be doing. Reporting requirements. Anna Marie talked about your 990s. There are certain forms you have to file every year, both with the Secretary of State, the Charitable Trust of California, and the IRS. So that is something that when we talk about the potential disadvantages of nonprofit is the paperwork. The paperwork is compliance, and you have to be compliant. Otherwise, they may put you on a hold. So the paperwork part is important. I'm going to talk real quick about fiscal sponsorship. I know we had said, you know, what if I have a philanthropic arm to my for-profit? How could I go about doing that? Fiscal sponsorship is an opportunity to do that. What am I doing here? I am just not an easy presenter. Fiscal sponsorship is an alternative to forming your own nonprofit. What you can do is you can find an existing 501c3 organization and operate under their EIN. So instead of going through all of those steps to incorporate yourself and get your IRS determination letter, you can find an existing nonprofit and start work immediately under them. What they're going to do in return for allowing you to operate under their EIN, they're going to do your accounting, your bookkeeping, your financial reporting, your compliance, your human resources, and your insurance. So you're going to pay them a percentage of revenue to cover all of those costs. But in return, they're going to make sure that you're doing all of those items correctly. One of the big things with fiscal sponsorship is if you're a brand new organization and you really don't have nonprofit experience, it's a great way to get your organization started and mentor with a nonprofit to learn how to be a nonprofit leader. It's something where even if you are an existing 501c3, if you're struggling keeping staff and you're not able to do all the organization requirements of being a 501c3, you can go dormant and operate in fiscal sponsorship to rebuild. So there's a lot of different reasons why you would look at it. A lot of it still comes down to what are you hoping to accomplish? What is the structure or skills you have in place to run your organization? And fiscal sponsorship is an opportunity. If you can't come out of the gate with accounting, with finance, with HR, fiscal sponsorship allows you to get into the nonprofit arena right away. So now I'm going to stop. I get 13 minutes for questions, and I'm sure they're going to come fast and furiously. As I said, this is content that you'll get, so don't worry if you didn't take notes. You'll still be able to see what's what. And then I saw in the chat that someone had called out Sarah at the Public Law Center. Her information will be at the end of this document. She is phenomenal. She is the person we recommend. But the Public Law Center is definitely a go-to organization for legal support for nonprofits in Orange County. So at this point, I will open it up to questions and hopefully we can help you.
Thank you so much, Victoria and Anna Marie. This has been super insightful. I just wanted to make sure that we go back to Jackie Nunez, had a question earlier. And then after Jackie, we had Yolanda. So Jackie, if you wanted to go off mute or type it.
Yeah, I actually took myself off unmute. Thank you so much. Very, very informative. And I have been in business for 30 years. And every year, as just part of my give back, I ran a program called Mrs. Claus Has a Cause. And so I would adopt tribal members that were in need at Christmas time. This year was the first time that I used a GoFundMe. And because we used that, we got a big nationwide commercial from NBC. And so it went nationwide, the program. And so several people suggested that, you know, off of my Native American business, that perhaps that one arm could become a nonprofit, because it was just a way of me in, you know, giving back to the Native American community.
So is your work for giving back, though, was not part of your business? It was just something you were doing on the side?
Yes, it was something, yeah. It was something that I did for 30 years, and I was Mrs. Claus, and then I would adopt families, and usually 70% of the families were Native American, but there were 30% that could be any family that was in need. And, and so this year we, you know, raised money to, you know, give back to, I think it was 4 were Native American and 3 were non-Native, and we supplied, you know, Christmas needs for the family. So because we were picked up by NBC and because we did the GoFundMe, several people said you should start a nonprofit specifically for that.
So that's an opportunity. As I said, as we started the slide deck, one of the things to look at is to ask yourself questions. So that's an amazing program. Is there someone else out there doing it? Are you serving in an area where there isn't another large nonprofit doing the same thing? Because the one thing we want to do is we build nonprofits to support the community. We just don't want a lot of nonprofits. We want a lot of strong nonprofits. So we always tell folks, I don't want to dissuade you from starting a nonprofit, but definitely look at what's out there in the marketplace that exists in that arena. If it doesn't exist, then you are looking at filling a need. And I think a nonprofit route might be a great opportunity. That might also be an opportunity for fiscal sponsorship, wherein maybe the formality of a nonprofit is not something you need to tackle out of the gate because you have that service in that just that time period. But
Yes.
maybe you could go into a fiscal sponsorship relationship and then build from there. And as a fiscal sponsor, you can, or project, you can eventually emancipate into a 501c3. So just
Yeah.
because you start in fiscal sponsorship, it doesn't mean you can't ever be a standalone nonprofit. It's a nice path to starting. So I think you might want to look at that, Jackie.
Well, yeah, and we were partnering with an organization like the Girl Scouts, which is a big
Yes.
nonprofit. And so I
Yes.
could, pursue that as being the fiscal sponsor, and so I will look into that.
Yeah, so one thing to consider, not every nonprofit necessarily is a fiscal sponsor, because in order to fiscally sponsor a project, a nonprofit has to have systems set up to be able to do so. So Girl Scouts may not fiscally sponsor you, they may contribute to you, but I would recommend you look at someone who is a fiscal sponsor simply because they'll already have the processes and systems to support you as a project.
And then do you have a list, or you can help us find companies that are fiscal sponsors?
Yes. Yes, in fact, I can start when we're wrapped up. Is my contact information will be on this deck. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll help you with that process. Absolutely.
Thank you
And
very
then I
much.
know Irene asked, how do we find a grant writer? So grant writers are a tough one. Grant writers are the golden ticket. I wish I were a grant writer because I could then be just doing everything. There is the Association for Professional Grant Writers. So there is an organization in Orange County, and they might make some recommendations. If not, if you email me, and again, my contact will be in this presentation, I can email you some grant writers that OneOC recommends.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I wanted to just double check if Yolanda with Sacred Touch had a question. I know there was something put in the chat by Yolanda. If you want to put it in the chat box or go off mute.
Yes. I belong to an organization called Breath of Fire. We're a bilingual writing group. And we lost a grant because we were not, we had not applied or registered with the Department of Justice. And we had been operating for many years, and that never happened before. And so we did make the application, and then we got a letter stating that now we owed money because we had to go back to our records from 2017, which was a shock to all of us. And so we're working on complying. But that, so that was kind of like a surprise, but I think because Lendistry is now the main organization you go through when you apply for grants, that they're being more, they're scrutinizing more. So you have to really check to make sure that you make the proper applications with the state and the Department of Justice, and you get your city license and all of that. It's very important.
Absolutely. And Yolanda, I would recommend, I don't know what you needed to file with the Department of Justice. Normally, there is a Department of Justice component, but I don't know what you missed on. But if you now are being asked to pay, or reconcile back years having not registered, I would talk to an attorney to make sure that's accurate. The other thing is Lendistry is one of the grant platforms that is being used by some funders. It's not the only one. It happens to be what, at least in my experience, it's a funding platform that tends to be restrictive in that it sets itself up. And if you operate outside of the kind of that setup, then it doesn't know what to do with you. So I always tell folks, if you're working with Lendistry and you run into any issues, contact the direct funder, because Lendistry is not the funder. Lendistry is the system the funder is using to process applications. So if you run into issues with Lendistry, I'd go direct to the funder and see if they can help you reconcile it.
Yes, but you know, it is a domino effect, because when we applied with the state of California, they were so behind, they didn't, they were behind on 2020 and 2021. And so the city of Santa Ana said they had to hold up our business license because they needed to have the okay that we were, that we had applied for the state and that we had been accepted. So you just have to really check on those kind of things. You can't just assume that it's in the process and you're going to get it done. I mean, it's going to be done. You have to do your work.
Yes, absolutely. And someone had also posted a question real quick about if you're under an umbrella on a current nonprofit, is it easy or challenging to break away? So I just want to say, if you are a fiscally sponsored project of an existing 501c3, so if you're under the umbrella of a current nonprofit because they're fiscally sponsoring you, yes, you can transfer to another fiscal sponsor. You don't have to stay there. However, if you are a program or a service under a nonprofit, meaning you're part of that nonprofit, I don't know if you can necessarily break away because that service may belong to that nonprofit. So that question, I really don't have an answer for you, but if you're fiscally sponsored, if that's where you're coming from, you can change fiscal sponsors. That is, and read your fiscal sponsorship agreement, because every fiscal sponsor should sign a formal contract with you. Read the agreement to see what your termination clause is.
Thank you so much.
Victoria, thank you. These are great questions. I'm learning a lot here. Graciela has a raised hand. I wanted to make sure we got to your question. Graciela, if you want to go off mute.
That was it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to think if I missed anyone. Oh, Chef Jason, who had a question about a philanthropic arm to his current for-profit. I just wanted to go back to that, Chef. It all depends on what you want to do with your nonprofit side. Again, if you want to create a nonprofit side, for example, to give free food to people, right? So you're going to help with food insecurity. Then that obviously is a charitable functionality of a nonprofit. But if you're trying to create a nonprofit where potentially your for-profit would be getting money because that nonprofit exists, talk to Sarah about how you want to best set up, because you've got to be careful with that interaction. And then just so you know, there's also a fiscal sponsorship model called Model C, where an existing for-profit can create a fiscal project in connection with a 501c3 and create a philanthropic arm to their entity. So if you want to follow up with me, Chef Jason, my email will be at the end of this presentation. I'm happy to walk you through a Model C option.
And we just got another question from Sasha in the chat. Victoria, what kind of nonprofits do cemeteries fall under?
Cemeteries fall under in terms of what? Again, when you think about a nonprofit, your nonprofit exists because it's a charitable function for the community. So it would depend on how is your cemetery a charitable function. If you're existing because the public can use you, you're providing a service to them at no fee, you might be a 501c3. But if you're doing your work as a cemetery and somehow also have a for-profit, you might be a different 501c designation. I would talk to an attorney about what you're really trying to accomplish. within being a cemetery. It's kind of not enough information for me to guide you. So definitely talk to an attorney about the best option.
And we have a new question, Victoria, from Irene. She just asked any special recommendations for current nonprofits that are a food pantry for senior citizens.
So any special recommendations? So are you looking for an existing nonprofit that serves senior citizens? I think there's a number of very large nonprofits. Of course, Second Harvest is one. CAPOC has their food bank. And I know both of them focus on senior citizens. Another big one is Community Serve, which is Meals on Wheels, which is a nonprofit that huge percentage of their work is serving senior citizens. So if you're looking for an existing one to kind of look at, those are three I recommend.
Oh, she put
excellent,
yes.
Irene.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Is there any
And
other
then
questions?
there's something about Walking Shield. I think that was directly to Jackie. Are they in
Oh,
Costa
yes.
Mesa, Yolanda? Is Walking Shield in Costa Mesa?
Yes, they are. They're by the John Wayne
Yep.
Airport.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. I know
Yeah,
that we're
the
getting
green-
close to time. Oh, go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, I was just going to say, Sasha put Green Echo Cemetery. I think, again, Sasha, the Green Echo Cemetery is going to go back to, is it considered charitable according to the IRS? And you can look on their website and they'll define charitable and give you examples, and you can determine if that matches up. Sorry about that, Alex.
No, not at all. I know we're getting close. Well, I know we went over time a little bit, but I do really want to thank you, Victoria and Anna Marie, for being here and providing this information. So there's a lot to this, a lot of good information, and I do want to point out the website for OneOC. So I posted here in the chat box. So when you have a chance, do look at the different resources they offer. I know you do offer a lot, and some of the trainings that one of which I went to, you offer are great as well too. So I do encourage all of you to spend some time looking at that. I will send out the recap email with Victoria's information along with Anna Marie's. And remember too that we will have a recap. The recap email will have the slide deck, a video, right, the Zoom recording, and you'll also have a post-assessment, almost like a worksheet. Would you describe it, Victoria?
Yeah, it's a 2-page document that just is going to ask you a lot of questions that I posed in some of these slides, but you can answer it at your pace, and it really will help you kind of decide, is the nonprofit path right for you? And if it is, what are things you're missing that you need to research, or what resources do you need to find to continue your journey?
Awesome. So yeah, I would definitely, so that'll be on the email as well too. Definitely look at that. Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, maybe we had one more question. I think Veronique wanted to get a
Oh
question.
yeah, we have a question.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, Veronique. So yeah, please.
Hi, I'm sorry. I put it,
go
it's in the chat box. My question, wait, let me see. I'm sorry, I'm driving.
Oh,
So
perfect. I can say it out loud, Veronique.
okay, thank you.
So Veronique's question here, are there any services offered from your nonprofit that will review our nonprofit's paperwork before submitting?
OneOC does not work on paperwork for forming a nonprofit, simply because we're not a legal firm. We don't have attorneys on staff. So I would recommend you reach out to Sarah at the Public Law Center if you need a legal review. I think it's a great idea to get it reviewed before you submit. And that's where we refer everyone to the Public Law Center for their support.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I feel like there was one last question in here too. Okay, from Lisa. How realistic is it to anticipate that either by forming a nonprofit or partnering with a fiscal sponsorship that one can make a livable income?
I would say it's realistic. However, you have to be honest. Are you forming a nonprofit in order to make a livable income? Or are you forming a nonprofit to serve the community? And by raising money, you'll be able to have a livable income as a staff member. I think a lot of it depends upon your ability to raise funds, because at the end of the day, you need to make money to be a nonprofit. It is a business. So I would look at what is it that your nonprofit is going to do? What is the programming that you're going to provide? And what kind of funding would you need to cover those costs? That's going back to the budget. And then once you have an idea of those numbers, look in the marketplace and see what funders or what grants are out there. And then also what kind of donor campaign would you need to put together to get individual donations or corporate contributions. There's a lot of different funding buckets with the nonprofit world. Funding is a continual step. It's not a secondary step. I know, again, we love to serve the community. That's our passion, but the business side has to be thought of as well. So really, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what kind of fundraising you can actually commit to.
All right, thank you for that, Victoria.
Thank you. And we have a picture, right, that we wanted to take, Joanna?
Yeah, we're gonna take a picture if everyone is comfortable turning on their camera, and if not, you can put a reaction like a little heart, a thank you for Victoria for giving this great presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and screenshot. So I'll count to 3 when everyone's ready. Is everyone ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think we have a few more, so I'll take another one. And we can do the reactions as well. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yay, that was great. Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone.
It's good seeing everybody. Good seeing everybody's faces. All right, so
Good to
we'll
see
go
you,
ahead
Alex.
and wrap it up. But again, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, Victoria and Anna Marie, and everybody. Don't hesitate to reach out. OneOC is partners with CIELO, so we really hope that all of you utilize the resources if you have any additional questions and want to know more about them. Other than that, have a great night. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you at our next one. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Team OneOC.